and welcome to day 11 of our Disney Challenge. And today we will be discussing and rating The Sword in the Stone.
Sword in the Stone is Disney's take on the legend of King Arthur. So as you can guess from the title, it revolves around King Arthur pulling the sword out of the stone. However, it isn't that similar to the original story. Disney get in there and they rip it apart. They're more interested in casting Arthur as the young squire, like the nobody, in kind of the kingdom.
Yeah.
And they focus more on the character of Merlin and him mentoring the boy to the point where he pulls the sword out of the stone. So while it's about King Arthur, almost everything about it is kind of basically just Merlin and Arthur in a long training montage. It's basically a long training montage.
Yeah, and it's absolutely nothing like the legends of King Arthur at all. It's really, really loosely based on him. The story where he finds Excalibur.
The Sword in the Stone strikes me as a film where Disney, maybe he started writing it as King Arthur, but by the end, Disney was focused on the character of Merlin. And it's not really about Arthur as much as it's about Merlin as this wacky older guy who's an expert in magic and kind of can help Arthur pull the sword out of the stone. And then the film basically just rolls off of that, and it's just the adventures of Merlin for a good hour and a half.
Yeah, I love the character of Merlin. He's kooky, he's fun, he has a great song which I think is called Hockety Pockety, I think is the song. It's probably not actually what that song's called.
It's just a load of made up words. But yeah, no, I know the song you mean, and it's a good one. In fact...
Oh, I think it's Hidgetus Fidgetus, something like that.
Like, again, it's not a very musical film, but like the one song that everyone remembers is that, and actually it's kind of a strong one.
Yeah, and he's like packing all of his belongings into his suitcases and to go on holiday, and he's shrinking like literally every single thing that he owns in order to pack them into his suitcase to go and train Arthur.
Yeah, there's a load of good sight gags of just like inanimate objects messing around. Maybe that inspired Beauty and the Beast at some point, but yeah. Definitely it adds like those little physical comedy scenes that really populated the earlier Disney. Sword in the Stone also has, and it's good fun.
And there's Archimedes, the owl, who is Merlin's. Is he like Merlin's familiar? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, again, it's just taking the myth and like Archimedes, believe it or not, was not an owl. So again, it's just playing around like the wise owl character, which we've had in a few Disneys now.
There's a couple of owls coming up, isn't there? They're like important owl characters.
Yeah, lot of owls. Let's just fill in that role of wise owl.
Yeah, he's also like a really grumpy character. Like he is just not down for anything that Merlin does. Like he's just so not there for when they're being turned into different... Well, I don't think Archimedes ever gets turned into any different animal, but there's like a scene where Merlin turns him and Arthur into squirrels, and Archimedes is just so not there for that happening.
Sword in the Stone is basically just, it is, I've talked about episodic ones before, but Sword in the Stone is very episodic. It is literally just like 4 different adventures written up, and then it just ties it off with him pulling the sword out of the stone.
Becoming king.
Some of the episodes are quite good though. I mean, there is the pike in the moat.
Oh yeah, when they get turned into fish.
I forget about the pike a lot because it's not actually that memorable a scene, but you have Merlin and Arthur in fish form going around, and then a terrifying pike that I know it doesn't make sense biologically, but definitely is related to Monstro somewhere. Monstro the pike comes out, and it's really well animated. Like the thing with the older Disneys is that the animation's really inconsistent. There are some really scruffy bits, but then there are certain bits where you can tell that they went, right, we're going to draw this to perfection, and like the pike is one of those. Just you could tell that they must have been there crafting it for a long while. It's scary and it's fun. It's a good little scene.
Yeah, there's the bit where they turn into squirrels as well, which I've already mentioned, which is great. I can't actually remember why Merlin does all of this, like why he turns them all into different animals.
So each episode is attached to a lesson, and sadly I can't remember what each lesson is, but there's like a life lesson, and basically he turns them into animals. I guess to offer a different perspective,
Yeah,
something to
maybe.
do with like if you're going to be king, you have to know what the squirrels are doing, or like what nature's doing, I guess.
Yeah.
But of course, in squirrel format, um, there's a female squirrel takes a liking to Merlin, I think.
Yeah, she gets really attached to Merlin, doesn't she? And one gets attached to Arthur as well. And it's just Merlin like running away from this female squirrel for the whole time, and then he's just like, "Look, madam, you won't like me. I'm an ugly, grouchy old man." And then the squirrel's just like cozying up to him, and then eventually he turns back into himself, and the squirrel just screams and runs away.
Yeah, it's a good fun scene. Like I think Sword in the Stone is like, while it's not the most memorable Disney, it's one you kind of can stick on. Like the kids will just be like captured in it.
I like the villain as well.
Madame Mim.
Yeah, the marvelous Madame Mim. She's fun.
Yeah, she's bit of a strange one because she's like such a good villain, but like she's condensed to her scene. She shows up, Arthur gets in trouble, Merlin comes up, and there is a great action scene. And I'm not taken away from the action scene; it's really good. But then that's kind of Madame Mim condensed
Yeah,
to one.
that's what she does. But it's a great scene where they're trying. So her and Merlin are basically trying to outmagic each other by turning themselves into different, like creatures, aren't they? So she turns into an elephant, I think. Merlin turns into a mouse. She turns into a snake. Merlin turns into like a lion or something. And then eventually she turns into a dragon. But also they're always the colour of what kind of their clothes are. So whatever animal Merlin turns into, he's always like a greyish blue colour. And her colours are pink and purple. So whatever animal she turns into, she's always pink and purple.
I think it's a clever evolution of the story as well, because like Merlin's just there turning Arthur into all of these various animals, and then Madame Mim basically answers the question: what if someone nasty had the same power? And then also, what would happen if good and evil with the same powers met? And it's such a fun wizards fight. I mean, sorry Harry Potter, but that's what all of your 8 films and 7 books should have been. That just constant.
And then she turns into a dragon at the end, doesn't she? And kind of topical for right now. He defeats her by turning into a germ.
Yeah.
And because she's like, "Oh, I can't see you. Where are you?" And then he's like, "Well, I'm all over you, but I'm invisible." And then she gets sick because he turns into a virus.
Yeah, which proves that even the biggest animals can be defeated by the smallest things. Again, a moral, but one that right now does not look very good age-wise.
Yeah, true. No, I wouldn't recommend rewatching Sword in the Stone during the lockdown period, if I'm honest.
My problem with Sword in the Stone is that those 3 little episodes, the Pike, the Squirrel, and Madam Mim, they're great, but they don't actually add up to anything. They're just kind of like fun distractions, and then it cuts to probably the most detached ending there ever was. Like, while Pinocchio is quite detached in how like they just stuck on monster at the end, at least it was its own. It was kind of exciting in its own right. Whereas it's just cuts to Merlin, Arthur, beg your pardon, on the throne room, and
Well, he pulls out the stone. He pulls out the sword first, and he's got like, I think his family. Like, there's the big fat ginger guy and his like scrawny son, whose names I can't remember, and he's like their squire, isn't he?
well, that was probably one of the few things from the original tale. Was basically like he was symbolising the strong. This guy probably should be pulling the sword out the stone, but it turns out that Arthur has the courage that he learned through all these trials.
And they go up to try it, and it doesn't happen. And then Arthur's like, "Oh, there we go," and then he becomes king.
But just watching that scene recently, I'm like, it just, I don't know, it was so flat, and it was almost like they had to.
It's like, well, we have to have him be king at the end.
And it was just like, Madam Mim had nothing to do with that. The female squirrel, I thought would have been a great joke to throw back in at the end, but nothing happens, and it's almost, it makes Sword in the Stone quite, I don't know, pointless. I always felt like the writers got in a room, had a fun, but like maybe a deadline was hit last minute, and they ended up rushing it, and it's, I mean, out of all of the Disneys we've reviewed, like, kind of, I've taken what they were, but Sword in the Stone's probably the one where I was like, I would love you guys to do that again, because Disney, you could do that so much better, that story.
They haven't forgotten it though. Like, Merlin's used a lot in the theme parks. I'm pretty sure he's in like every single parade. Arthur hasn't been used that much, but they have the sword in the stone in most, if not all, theme parks. And Merlin used to come and do a little challenge where he used to like pick people to come and pull the sword out, which he'd get adults to come and do it, and obviously they couldn't. And then whenever like he picked the right kid, he'd press the button that like released the sword, and then they would get a medal and get to be like a knight of Fantasyland for that day.
And I assumed I pulled it out because I was the bravest one in the party. You just ruined my childhood.
Yeah,
Thank
sorry,
you.
no, yeah, you did.
Fun fact.
Fun fact. I'll give you 2 fun facts. First fun fact is that Arthur had 3 voice actors for him, as the original voice actor went through puberty halfway through filming. So then they gave it to a couple of the animators' sons to voice the rest of it.
You could tell that though, because watching the film, the voice acting quality is like, well, not necessarily the quality, but the voice changes up and down.
Yeah, you can tell he changes voices. The second fact is that I believe that this was the first Disney animated film that the Sherman Brothers wrote the music for. Now, the Sherman Brothers are really important in Disney and indeed just kind of all animation history. So they wrote all the songs for Mary Poppins. They did a lot of the theme park songs were the Sherman Brothers. So, for example, like my most hated song ever, It's a Small World, comes from the Sherman Brothers. Pretty sure they did the Tiki Room as well. Like, they did 90% of stuff for Disney, like the original Disney parks, and pretty much every Disney film from here on out they were involved in, up until a point where they just didn't do it anymore. But yeah, they're my facts.
I like Sword in the Stone, but like I said, I think it could have been done better, and I think it's almost more of a fun distraction than a good film in its own right. 4.
I'm going to give it one higher with a 5. Yeah, because I like it. I remember liking it a lot as a child, but obviously not as much now I've watched it back.
And there you have it.
Yeah, that is all for today. So, goodbye and have a magical rest of your day.